You make all the calls from wherever you are. If it's the Tampa Bay Rays, you make the call from your suite at Globe Life Field. You make the calls and don't even bring out Kevin Cash. You don't even need to pay a manager because you are the manager, the de facto manager.
Exactly. And I guess there was like this unwritten rule in Tampa that the pitcher does not face the same hitter 3 times. And that is why one of the reasons why they took him out, because he was about to face all these guys again for the 3rd time. But I mean, if he has dominated them these last 2 times, why not just keep him in there? And also, yes, numbers can tell you one thing or another. But as an athlete, once you get in your groove and you find your rhythm, I don't care what the numbers say, let me play.
They should just put a beeper on the pitcher now. And then once he gets to so many pitches, they don't even got to come get him. He just walk off the mound. Why don't they just do that? Just put a beeper on.
There you go.
Go back to the 90s. Hit him on his hip. Hit me on my hip when it's time to come out.
Hit me on the pager.
Yeah, that's what we used to see, with pitchers, having them go an entire game, going the 9 innings or 8 innings, having that relief pitcher or, hit 100 pitches, they got there sooner. But now it's, all based out of, out of numbers and out of analytics. Blake Snell only had 73 pitches.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
He was, like you said it, I mean, he was dominating. This is how passionate I am about this when, talking about it. It's just like they get in a groove and just let them their instinct, or the managers use their instinct, and to be able to, do what is best for the team, for the game at that moment that they're in. And we're not seeing that baseball, that pitching like we used to see with Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, Curt Schilling, Mariano Rivera. That has changed. Analytics, yes, is good. I think it's good in the aspect of your outfielders. But when it comes down to the pitching, I think that's ruining it.
I think it's ruining the game, period, though. I'm sorry, Ed, just because it's not just the pitching or the outfielders. There were times where they put 4 outfielders in. That's absolutely asinine. And here's why I think the analytic part is overly asinine. You have 4 infielders in. Put the ball on the ground to where an infielder isn't. Don't swing away. The problem with baseball is when we grew up watching baseball, they built on innings. You got a single, then you bunted them over to second, you sacrificed an out, and then you got a hit and got a run. Now what they do is, we'll wait till someone gets on, and then we'll swing for the fences after that. It's no longer a bad thing to strike out 200 times in a season. When we were growing up watching baseball, you strike up 200 times more than once, you're back in Triple A, because the idea is to put the ball in play. That's no longer an idea. Imagine if Ichiro came up now. They tell him to be a home run hitter instead of a slap hitter, and he wouldn't even be a Hall of Famer. Imagine if Ricky Henderson played now. With all those stolen bases, the problem is the analytic people that are – see, there's nothing wrong with analytics, but they're overly analytic. I remember seeing Ricky Henderson walk, still second, still third, come home on a ground out. 1 out, he scored. His team is up 1-0. The pitcher's already frazzled. Nowadays, they would tell Ricky, swing for the fences, Ricky. If you're out, don't worry about it. If you get on, don't still wait. They're taking the joy out of the game, and it's really not – it's not a fun game to watch anymore.
I want to ask you guys this. Talking about analytics and the way that we're seeing pitching and the way that it's taken away from baseball and being overanalyzed, is that the reason why pitchers are pitching at, as much as they are now? And they're not lasting the innings that they used to because now there's all this other stuff in play? I
say no. I say pitchers aren't pitching as much as they used to because when you were a kid back in the day, you played baseball during baseball season, you played football during football season, and you played basketball during basketball season. Now, at 12 years old, you get pigeonholed into what you're going to do. So now instead of arms getting rested at 12 and 13, they're at pitching camp. And then they're pitching for this team. And then they're pitching for this traveling team. And so an arm at 21 is really an arm at 28 from all the pitching they've done in little leagues and traveling. When they don't get a chance to just be kids now, everything is specialized. And coming from someone who has kids that play sports, you have to be careful because they try to pigeonhole your kids into something, and that's all they want them to do. And then they want to send them to 8,000 camps just to do that one thing, and you get worn out. It happens in football. It happens in basketball because you see more young players getting knees and ankles hurt because they only do one thing as opposed to developing other muscles by doing other sports and doing other things. So I think that's why you see pitchers not having the stability because they can't throw 100 pitches at the age of 27 because of all the pitches they threw at the age of 12. I think that's really the problem, more so than anything else.
I agree. I think it has something to do with all the injuries. There's been so many cases of Tommy John injuries with a lot of these pitchers. I think baseball teams are scared of their high profile pitchers actually coming down with these Tommy John injuries and all these other various injuries that they could come down with if they're pitching 7, 8, or 9 innings every fifth day. So I believe that's why these teams are loading up their rosters with all these relief pitchers and all these guys that can come in and give relief to these starting pitchers, like a Blake Snell or Clayton Kershaw, so they don't have their high-profile pitchers who they're paying tens of millions of dollars to don't suffer injuries, like a Steven Strasburg, whose career has been plagued by so many injuries.
And I feel like also with the injuries, it has to do with them being as kids, like with that level of competition, they're forcing these kids to throw curveballs and to, and that throwing a curveball at a young age will cause you to get Tommy John later on. It's like not even recommended until you are fully developed as an arm. And as a guy, as a kid, like they develop even later on, and they're forcing these kids in club ball when they're in junior high to throw these kinds of pitches. And now also in baseball, we're seeing all these kids that are not even just pitchers that are getting Tommy John surgery. I've had already 2 of my friends that are shortstops getting Tommy John surgery, and that is because they're overusing their arm.
So we're going to move on onto a little bit of what we saw out there with Kershaw, with Jansen, Blake Trinan. Like that was just continue a little bit on the pitching, how phenomenal they were, and not to mention Rosarena, Manuel Margot, Mike Zunino, like just the caliber of the players that were out there, not only for the Dodgers, but also Tampa Bay Rays. And they were a young team. They put their hearts out there, both teams, and how they were just able to just come out and come on top. Being a Tampa Bay team that's not out there, you wouldn't hear them before the World Series. And now it's going to be something that for them is going to turn it around a bit. So what's going to happen from here on out for these players and for Tampa and the caliber that they all performed. Ed?
For a team that had a payroll of about $75 million, which is not even half of what the Dodgers payroll was, I believe theirs was maybe $180 million, for them to only be 3 games behind them as far as the regular season record is, 40-20. What an amazing accomplishment the Tampa Bay Rays have done to win the division by 7 games, beat the Yankees in the playoffs, knock off the Yankees, outlast the Houston Astros in a great Game 7. Paul, shaking your head. Why are you shaking your head, bro?
No comment.
No comment. But what a great season that they had. Yes, it came up short and they couldn't knock off the Los Angeles Dodgers, but you got to give them credit for putting a team together, a discovery of Randy Arozarena. Like you said, Joe, the St. Louis Cardinals have got to be kicking themselves for letting this young man go. He hit 10 home runs in the postseason, set a postseason record, another postseason record, 29 hits, 64 total bases. What a revelation Randy Arozarena was this season. What a joy to watch him play from beginning to end. And it ended in Game 6, but Hunter Renfroe, Brandon Lau, Manuel Margot, Willie Adames, Kevin Kiermaier, all these names, and, of course, Blake Snell and all the really solid pitchers that the Tampa Bay Rays had, they were there for a reason. That's an excellent baseball team with an excellent head manager, regardless of what he did with Blake Snell. That decision, which I still think was above his head, but irregardless of that, Kevin Cash is a great manager, and I think Tampa Bay will be back next year. They keep all the pieces together as much as possible. Of course, they won't. The whole entire team won't be together. There'll be some losses. Every team suffers losses during the postseason, and every team won't be the same. But as long as they can keep the nucleus together, I think Tampa Bay can compete for a lot of years to come, even with a small payroll.
Yeah, well, that small payroll is about to go away because these dudes now want to get paid. Here's where the struggle comes in. If you're the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Red Sox or the White Sox or the Cubs, St. Louis, you open your checkbook. When you're Tampa Bay, you just try to figure out, okay, who can I keep? And now who's the next person on the cheap I can get? And I think that's the problem that they're going to run into. If they could keep everyone together, that would be cool. But some of those names you mentioned, they're not getting by with paying them, $900,000, $2 million, $3 million. That's not going to happen. So now Tampa has to make that decision. What are we going to do? Do they turn into Oakland and play that Moneyball bull crap and try to underpay everybody and see who they can get next? Or do they open up? And see, this is the problem I have with sports in general, especially baseball. It's the only sport where you will sell your whole team to start all over next year. And if it fails, you start trading everybody else again, as opposed to old baseball where you ran it back. You run it back. You get close, you pay a couple people, and you run it back. So as soon as it's time for someone to get paid, they move them. Look at Kansas City. Kansas City had a little nice 3-year stretch. When it came time to pay people, they traded them away or let them walk. You think Tampa's not going to do the same thing? And that's the sad part. And yet everybody gets mad at the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Cubs and the White Sox and the Cardinals. And they say, oh, look at them. They cheat. They pay everybody out. Well, yeah. If you own the business and you had a good employee, wouldn't you want to pay your good employee to keep them? And if another company didn't pay their good employees and they were talented, if you could afford it, wouldn't you poach them and have them come work for you? So I don't get why people whine that the Yankees have a high payroll. Well, you know why? Because they pay their players. They pay for performance. You know what? You can drive a Mercedes or you could drive a Yugo. Eventually, that Yugo is going to break down. And eventually, you're going to get tired of driving it and you want to move up to something else. These players, after a while, they don't want to keep playing for pennies. They want to make them dollars. I don't blame them. And so I don't look for Tampa Bay to be around for 2, 3, 4 years. They're going to squeeze all the water out of the sponge that they can now, and then guys are going to start leaving to make some real money.
Those are some examples, and we saw it at the year following from when the Chicago Cubs won the World Series too. Dismantled the team, and where have they gone from there? Nowhere. So hopefully that's not the same for the Tampa Bay.
Could you repeat that? My earphone messed up.
Oh,
what happened with the Cubs now?
I'd love to hear that.
What did you say happened with the Cubs? I'm sorry, my earphones were going out. The Cubs are what now?
Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, because my earphones went out. What were you saying about that team? I apologize.
Dismantled that team after the World Series win. Remember?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we only got to wait, 96 more years now? For
another probably 100 years. You love that. I know that. Aileen?
Okay, so the king or the leaders of dismantling teams and selling them off once they're actually good are D-backs. Come on, we have to admit it. It pisses me off, and they do it. So it's like, yes, it's going to happen. It's going to happen with Tampa Bay. But you know what? It's good for the guys. Individually, it's good for them because you're in a team that nobody saw. Like, literally, their only fan there was the Ray in center field. Even before COVID, nobody went to their games. Like, they had trouble of getting fans to the games, and this wasn't the COVID problem. So Tampa Bay was never really in anybody's radar. And yet again, as a player, you do so good, and you're there on stage. Everybody's seeing you, the biggest stage in baseball, World Series. Of course, you're going to do good. All these kids had like ESPN top 10 highlights in every play they had. And that's because they are playing their hearts out. Because if they know they play their hearts out this year, they give it their all, they can actually get a good contract and a good deal next season. They actually, other teams see them. And you got to go individually sometimes. It is a team sport, but it's, you got to look out for yourself and you got to do good so that you can get a better contract next year. But yeah, there was a lot of great kids that we saw from both teams. And even though I was rooting for the Rays to win in the Game 7, I was happy that Dodgers won just because of my compatriota, you say it in Spanish, Julio Urias, Mexico, man, it was great. And I was really happy. My Mexican blood was screaming. My grandma was always yelling at the screen with Fernando Valenzuela. And I feel like ever since then in the Fernando Mania, we didn't have like that true Mexican connection with this young kid that, and he's actually from not even that far from the border here in Arizona. So it kind of feels even closer to home,
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you. That's one of the things. They have Mookie Betts, which comes from Boston fan. It's kind of hard to not go for him. But the other one, Julio Urias, you mentioned it, Aileen, Mexico. I was like such a young kid. He was on fire. He was phenomenal. Becoming, a top starter. He was dominating the way that he was closing out the games. And, and it reminded me when I was watching the World Series, and you mentioned that Fernando Valenzuela, we haven't had anything similar to that. And it's like, oh my gosh. And and I thought, I'm like, how it was for